Ooh, it has been a wild few years for the transfer portal. Each year has set a record bigger than the one before. Last year, over 3,200 entrants, which is why we have our next guest join us on the show, because it is impossible to cover all of that. But somehow he does it. Our 24/7 Sports transfer portal expert, Chris Hummer, is here. And Chris, we have seen portal entries increase by 47% over the last 5 years. So what can we expect from this cycle?
Chaos, absolute chaos. It's going to be a crazy cycle overall. I'm really expecting a lot of big names. We just saw one go in the portal just a mere minutes ago in Will Howard. And there are a lot of other big names out there that are certainly being rumored right now. And I talked to a lot of staffers kind of in the run up to this cycle to try to get a feel for what it's going to be like. And not a single one of them said they thought there would be fewer players in the transfer portal this time around. COVID years are still out there. Transfers can transfer a second time once they graduate, so you're going to see a lot of guys do that. So I'm expecting well over 3,000 names again from the FBS.
Okay, you can't just drop the Will Howard and not give us some intel on that. The Kansas State quarterback entering the transfer portal. Maybe do you have a few names that we should be tracking early on in this?
I think Will's going to be a super popular quarterback in the portal. He obviously didn't lose the starting job this year, but he was right alongside with true freshman Avery Johnson at times, and Kansas State seems to be turning the page there. But Will's a guy I think is going to have a ton of interest in the portal. I would throw out a team like Notre Dame as a possibility. I think he might be a really good fit there. Depending on what happens with some other quarterbacks, I think a school like Wisconsin might be interested in Will Howard. I can think of quite a few QB needy programs, and there are many of them right now. That could be interested in somebody like Will. I think he's looked at as a quarterback that will be near the top of this portal class of quarterbacks, and he's going to be a popular name.
Another Will to keep track of is Will Rogers, one of the best quarterbacks in SEC history, statistically speaking, and we'll have no shortage of suitors. Chris, what's the pulse on the chase for Will Rogers right now?
Yeah, I'm hearing a little bit about Will. I think he's had a pretty robust market. He obviously struggled this year, but he has thrown for over 12,000 yards in his career, Mississippi State's all-time leading passer. I think he's going to have interest from several top 25 caliber teams, maybe even a couple of the top-end teams in the Pac-12 that could be QB needy will be in that mix. So I think Will's going to be a pretty popular name in the portal. Maybe not as popular as somebody like Will Howard, the other Will, but I think he'll have plenty of interest, despite maybe having not the year he wanted to for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, kind of two things happening with him as well, losing his head coach and gaining a new head coach. So we'll see what happens with that situation. But these things go hand in hand, right? The coaching carousel and the portal. So I'll ask you, with the departure of Jonathan Smith at Oregon State, who are some names maybe to watch on this Beavers roster who could potentially hit the portal?
I mean, I know Blair knows it's all about this quarterbacks over at Oregon State. It's a very popular room. Not only is DJ Uiagalelei there, but Aiden Childs, the true freshman quarterback, for one of my favorite prospects in the 2023 class. And I think a lot of people at 24/7 Sports share that sentiment. I think both of those guys, if they chose to enter the portal, would be extremely popular. DJU, I think, has really rebuilt himself this year at Oregon State. Will have a ton of interest in the portal if he does decide to go in. And Aiden is somebody that I think a lot of schools will look at the future as the future of their QB room if they can get him. I'm sure Jonathan Smith would love to take him to Michigan State with him, although that would be difficult to do to his alma mater, I would imagine. The other name I would bring up with Oregon State is Damian Martinez, their star running back. He ran for over 6 yards per carry this year. I think he's run for 1,000 yards in back-to-back seasons. If he does decide to go in the portal, I think a lot of that will just be dependent on who Oregon State hires as its head coach. There is the option of going the internal route there, and I think that could save the roster in large part. But if Damian does go in, he'd be an extremely popular name.
Yeah, and Aiden Childs did have a very cryptic Instagram message over the weekend, kind of a farewell if you want to read between the lines, but we'll see obviously what happens there. One thing that did happen this past weekend, Dana Holgorsen out at Houston. Who are some names that you're hearing there with that roster, Chris?
I would say the number one name to know on that roster, period, is Matthew Golden, the wide receiver, second-year player. He is considered one of the best receivers in the Big 12 now. I'm getting my Houston Cougars mixed up. And I think if he were to go in the portal, he would have high high-end Power 5 interest. I can think of a number of teams that would love to get a shot at him. I think the Cougars have battled all year to keep him. Going into last week, I think Houston was confident it would, but that was before Dana Holgorsen lost his job. So with a new coach coming in, I think priority number one for them is going to be keeping Matthew Golden on the roster. He is one of the elite wide receivers on that level. And then another name I would bring up is Jamari Caldwell, a defensive end at Houston. I think if he entered, he would have a ton of Power 5 interest as well.
All right, the Texas A&M vacancy has been filled, and while everybody's focused on keeping the talent in Aggieland, who are maybe some big names to watch from Duke who could follow their former head coach?
Well, the biggest is definitely his quarterback, Riley Leonard. We've reported on Riley Leonard a little bit. He is somebody a lot of schools are taking a close look at in the portal. I think there's a pretty good chance he ends up in the portal, although nothing is obviously set in stone at this point. Riley Leonard was somebody that came into the year with a lot of first-round draft buzz. I think he's somebody that would be an immediate top-of-market player among quarterbacks, and if he went in, it'd be a frenzy for him. This is somebody with all the tools in the world. He is a former high school basketball star in Alabama. He is a Daniel Jones starter kit in a lot of ways. He might probably be a little bit bigger and a little bit faster than Daniel Jones as well. He has all the intangibles coaches love. He is somebody that if he went in the portal would have interest from every QB needy team in the country. He's that good.
Certainly is. We'll see what happens with him and the projected 3,000 other guys that are probably going to hit the portal at some point in the next week. Chris, we know you'll be all over it. Thank you for being on the show. And a week from today, being on this show, we will bring you all-day live coverage of the opening of the December transfer portal. We'll have analysts like Chris all across the country on standby. We've got insiders in studio ready to break news and tons of big surprises. So tune in next Monday at 10 Eastern.